Ladies and gentlemen and brethren, we're live across the world. We're live across the UK for this evening's Solomon Live. My name is Brodie. I have the honour of being the Provincial Communications Officer in the distinguished province of Worcestershire, and also I have the honour of hosting these monthly webinars of Freemasonry conversation. And if you have any questions to our very special guest this evening, you can submit them via our question and answer facility on Zoom. So let's begin. Tonight's Solomon Live is with our very special guest this evening, Right Worshipful Brother, Sir Michael Snyder. Michael, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. A bit hot, like I suspect everybody else, but fine, thank you.
Yes, it is a little bit close, isn't it? So you've got to respect those from all over the world and all over the UK who are joining us this evening. So this is to get to know you, Michael, for the next 40 minutes or so. So let's begin with that with that question I like to ask. Where did your journey in Freemasonry begin? Where and when were you initiated?
I was initiated into the Needlemakers Lodge in 1986, and that actually happened at Inholders Hall in the city.
And we need to talk about your exaltation as well, don't we? When were you exalted?
In 1995 into the City Guilds chapter. That was in Bakers Hall, and it was a very memorable evening.
So let's go back to when you first became a Freemason. Was it a slow burn for you, or did you hit the ground running? Because for a lot of people, it takes a bit of time, doesn't it? What was it like for you?
It does take some time. In fact, I joined with a number of friends from the Needlemakers livery company, and we decided we'd try and find out what it was about. And so we joined, and it's a closed lodge, so it's only livery members of the Needlemakers that can join. And we began our journey together. So I suppose it happened on one way as a big bang, but in another way, it was a gradual process where I was only a member of Needlemakers Lodge for quite a number of years.
So we're going to get back to talking about Masonry in a bit, but one of the things I'd love to do is talk about your career, your commercial career in the city. You've had a long journey from growing business and focusing on innovation as well. Let's talk about that for a little bit, if you don't mind.
Okay. Well, I'm a chartered accountant. I started in a firm called Kingston Smith, and I was articled there, and I qualified, and then became a partner. And relatively shortly thereafter, it was a relatively small firm in those days, as most firms were in those days. I became the fifth partner in 1974. And became managing partner in 1979, and then we together, it's never one person, we all together grew it from there till I finished running it in 2016, and it was 64 partners and 500 staff, and it was a wonderful journey. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think we really had a good time, as well as delivering some pretty excellent services to our clients.
And could you have ever imagined at the beginning that it would turn into such an animal that it became?
Not at all. When I was asked to be a partner, I didn't even know if I wanted to be a partner. I didn't even know if I wanted to stay in the profession, or whether I wanted to go into commerce. But I made the decision to take the partnership, and the rest, as they say, is history. One thing followed another, and there were plenty of opportunities. And one thing about life is that I think, one needs to grab opportunities as they are presented to one.
And no, that's great advice. Absolutely, here. And we need to talk, don't we, about your involvement in the City of London Corporation. What does that actually involve for those who are not familiar with it, would you say?
Well, you as a member of the City of London Corporation, you are elected by the electorate, which consists of residents and businesses. During the time I've been an elected member, which is 36 years, the franchise has changed because we got a franchise bill enacted in approximately 2002 from memory, and that it enabled corporations to nominate voters. Before that, it had been partners or sole traders in businesses. So you get elected in your particular patch of the city, and then you go on to the Court of Common Council if you are elected, and then you get elected from, or appointed or elected onto various committees. And in my case, on the grounds that I rarely can say no, when I was asked to join a committee, I'd say, oh, how very flattering, and yes, I'll do that, and so on. So I've chaired the Barbican Residential Committee, which isn't anything to do with being a resident in the Barbican, it's to do with being the landlord of the Barbican estate. And from that, I was deputy chairman, then chairman of finance, and then I became chairman of policy and resources, which is like the leader of the City of London. That was between 2003 and 2008. And thereafter, I've chaired one or two other things, City of London School for Girls, and I'm currently chairing the Capital Buildings Board, as it now is, which is responsible for all the really major projects that the City of London undertakes. So, for example, that's including building a new courts complex with 18 courts, including for cyber and economic crime, and a new police headquarters for the City of London Police. To say, that's just one project, overseeing the moving of the Museum of London from its current site in London Wall to just west of Smithfield Market. And if the project gets approved, then there will be the moving, overseeing and moving of 3 markets, Spitalfields, Billingsgate and Smithfield, to a new site in Barking. So some major projects.
A lot of major projects there, crikey. So let's talk about your career overall, because in 2008 you were given the ultimate pat on the back. You were knighted. What was that like?
Well, it's very flattering, or it feels very flattering at the time. In those days, by those days, it was not in any way automatic for any positions that had been changed a good number of years before that. So it was unexpected and a delight. And I had the privilege of being knighted by Her Majesty at Windsor Castle several months after the letter comes from Number 10. It was in December, I can remember it entirely, and it was a very, very moving and good occasion.
Well deserved, Michael, but well deserved. So we need to get back to masonry, don't we? We'll return to your career a little bit later on, but let's get
as you wish.
Let's get back to that. How do you squeeze all of that in? Because you're a prolific Mason. We're going to talk about your high office in a moment, but how do you manage to squeeze all of that into your Masonic career?
Well, I think, as I've often said in Metropolitan Grand Lodge and elsewhere, one's family has to come first, and one's business career has to come second, and Masonry and other pastimes or hobbies comes after those. And I'm afraid I do approach it like that, because I feel that it's really important that one concentrates on one's family and certainly when it's needed, and one's business activities or career are really important. Having said that, I think it's like everything else. If you're focused, sufficiently focused, and you know what time you've got available for everything, you manage to fit it in. I'm pretty well known, I guess, for chairing meetings that don't last terribly long, because I don't like sitting in very long meetings, and I don't think anybody else really does. So meetings are fairly short. I'm pretty focused on what I do, and so I get it all in somehow. I mean, when I was running, when I was leading the city, and was running Kingston Smith, which I did at the same time, I think someone totted it up, and it was something like 115 hours a week, of activity, and that did not include masonry or other pastimes. So you have to be focused, and that's what I was, and indeed still am, because once I left Kingston Smith, once I retired from Kingston Smith, and I'm still a consultant to them, I took on other roles like Metrobank and so on. And so you have to be more focused, that when you've got a portfolio set of activities, you have to be even more focused about how you fit them in, because there's conflicting demands all the time.
Absolutely. And the one thing I really enjoy about Masonry is it can be a distraction from what goes on in the real world, if you will. Have you found that in your career?
I have got to say that when I was doing the 5.25 years as leader of the city, there wasn't a lot of time for Masonry. So I would only get to, I think I had 2 or 3 lodges then, Needlemakers, Guildhall Lodge, and maybe one other. And I only managed to get to them intermittently, but I still wanted to keep up my Masonry because, as you say, it's a focus. It takes you out of your normal world. And you know, Masonry has all sorts of other benefits. And when you're sitting there during a ceremony and you're letting it wash over you, hopefully quietly trying to see if you remember the words, you know, it's a very therapeutic process, in my opinion. And what I really enjoy afterwards is, you know, the festive board or the drinks before or whatever, and just chatting with friends and sharing a glass or some food with them, and that's really enjoyable, and you know, the stuff of life.
Oh, that's what it's all about, isn't it? And often, as soon as you walk into that lodge, the what's going on outside seems to be trapped outside, doesn't it? Now we need to talk, don't we, about your high office, Metropolitan Grand Master. How did that come about, Michael?
I think you'd have to ask those that appointed me. Well, His Royal Highness actually appointed me, but those that advised him to do it. How it came about is that the Grand Master and the Deputy Grand Master took me out to lunch one day and said, Michael, would you like to be Metropolitan Grand Master? And when I picked myself off the floor, because I had no aspirations or no you know, plan or thought that I might be Metropolitan Grand Master, I started discussing with them what was involved and whether I would have sufficient time to do it. So that's how it came about, out of the blue, literally.
And how long did it take you to decide? Was it pretty instant, or did you have to wait up a little bit?
I had to weigh it up a bit because, you know, I had to work out my predecessor, who's absolutely fantastic, Russell Race. I mean, really dedicated Mason who spent pretty well all of his time on Masonry. And I knew I could not get anywhere near the time commitment that he had. But Peter Lowndes and Jonathan Spence said, you must do it in your way. And you know, then we started talking about time commitment and what I could do alongside all of the public and business activities that I have. And I think at the time I was still chairing the government's Professional Business Services Council. So it was a matter of juggling a bit. But I was convinced, and with certain changes that I was suggesting or thought of, that they were receptive to, I thought it was doable. So I would say over 2 or 3 days.
And I think that's great to hear you speak like that, because that's what Masonry is at every level, isn't it? If you get offered anything in Masonry, you need to think, can I do it? Can I commit to it? And that's certainly what you did at that high level. And Metropolitan Grand Lodge is coming up to being 20 years old. For those who are not familiar, because we've got people from different provinces here, those who are not Masons as well, perhaps you can tell me about the history of Metropolitan Grand Lodge and how it came into existence.
Well, I must preface it by saying I wasn't really involved at that time in either its formation or particularly whether it should or shouldn't be formed, because I was doing other things and I wasn't a particularly senior Freemason at the time. But what happened previously was that the Assistant Grand Master was responsible for London Freemasonry direct, and then there were group chairmen and so on that reported into him. And there was no real separate focus on London. And bearing in mind its size, the then rulers and it was the Marquis of Northampton, I think, who was the Programme Master at the time, and had been Assistant Grand Master with those responsibilities, so knew about it, led the charge to do that. And then a group of people got together and worked out how that might happen. And, you know, I was probably at the time, as someone not involved, was a bit ambivalent. I've got to say, the closer I've got to know it and understand it, it was absolutely the right decision at the time. And frankly, it's gone from strength to strength. And yes, there are still some Masons in London that might, obviously not loudly anymore, but might privately mumble about it. But honestly, I think that most London Masons see the merit of it and the benefits of it, and having an identity that is different from any province, but you know, because it's much bigger, but and it's a different area and lots of different features. But it does give us an identity, and it does give us a focus, whether that's for charitable giving, whether that's for having an identity that is separate from just being a member of Grand Lodge, as being London Grand Rank or Senior London Grand Rank. Those ranks still exist, but they're dealt with through Metropolitan Grand Lodge.
Thank you for explaining that to us, Michael. And actually, we can talk about the rank system. We go to our first question, and that's come from Liam Kenny. Thank you very much indeed for sending that to us. And he says, perhaps you might explain a little more about London Rank and London Grand Rank that will appear alien to us from the provinces. Perhaps you could help us out with that.
Right. Well, in the provinces, of course, they mirror more or less the Grand Ranks offices, and they're past Junior Grand Deacon, or their whatever it is, provincial Junior Grand Deacon. In London, we do have those active offices. So, you know, Metropolitan Junior Grand Deacon or Metropolitan Grand Pursuivant or whatever it is, but they don't retain that as a past rank. Up to and including Junior Deacon, they become London Grand Rank as a past rank, and above that they become Senior London Grand Rank. So the wardens or whatever senior deacons would be Senior London Grand Rank, and that obviously is a simplified way of doing it. You can also be awarded London Grand Rank and Senior London Grand Rank without having been in an active office. And indeed, given that we have, compared with our number, relatively few, much fewer than a province of active offices compared with their membership, it makes sense. So there's a point system that we use, you know, pretty unmovably, really, because we, you know, when you've got so many Masons and so many units and so many people involved in the selection process, it has to be pretty fair. I want it to be pretty fair, and therefore we do stick to the point system pretty much. In fact, almost exclusively, I would say. And you get to a point system, and then you can become London Grand Rank, and then there's after a period of time that you can possibly become Senior London Grand Rank with a point system. There's also London Rank, which is, I don't award very many, but this is where people have not been through a chair of their lodge. So they're not worshipful brothers, they're brothers. And they've done, you know, made exceptional service for their lodge or for Masonry or for charity or whatever, and we wish to reward them. It doesn't happen desperately often, but it does happen, and I think it's a good extra rank to be able to award people.
You travel around the country traveling the world representing Metropolitan Grand Lodge?
No, that's I mean, I could travel around the country, you know, to provincial meetings or whatever, but my role is not to represent Masonry abroad. That is Grand Lodge's role, and so that is done by, you know, the Grand Chancellor and the High Rulers and the Grand Secretary and so on. So that's their role. Obviously, in my role as a member of the Board of General Purposes, we support that activity, but not as Metropolitan Grand Master. That isn't our role any more than it would be any role of a provincial Grand Master, or indeed a district Grand Master abroad to do the same thing.
Thank you, Michael. And that was actually Clifford. See, the very focus of playing it. Clifford, thank you ever so much indeed for proposing.
I had to give up varifocals. I couldn't stand them. So.
Oh, these are a nightmare, Michael, an absolute nightmare, especially when you're reading off a screen. Now, we need to talk about the pandemic. How did Metropolitan Grand Lodge react to that, would you say?
Well, it was a mixture of outcomes, I think. Clearly, everyone was, I think, across the country, pretty upset. Even though it was inevitable and sensible that we couldn't meet in the normal way. And that went on for, obviously, and I think in all of our cases, for far too long. And I think that would be a universal view among Masons. But it did have some upsides. So, for example, Zoom came into its own. And there were lots of meetings of all sorts by Zoom. And that had another byproduct, which is that some members who hadn't been seen at their lodge or chapter for many years re-engaged. And hopefully they will stay re-engaged. Now, and I suspect that was the same in the provinces as well. I don't know. But what was the different feature we have about London is, of course, most people get to their lodge meetings by public transport, which has a great advantage following the festive board, of course, but does cause some added issues, particularly for the more elderly Masons amongst us, and that has taken longer to recover, quite understandably, but I think we're now beginning to see much more progress, have been for a few months now, and I'm hopeful that we will get back to full operation, certainly after the summer break.
It's interesting you talk about Zoom, because for many of us that was a song by the Fat Larry's band, and now it's everyday way of life, isn't it? And we're speaking by that right now. But what came from that is an opportunity for Freemasons to show what we're all about and what we can do with regards to charity. So let's talk about charity and what you managed to do during that period of time.
Well, I mean, it was amazing. I've never ceased to be amazed at the volume of generosity of heart and actions of London Freemasons. The meals that were delivered from the West London Masonic Centre, I can't list them all out, and it would be invidious for me to do so. But the delivery of masks, the delivery of PPE equipment, the way in which we engaged with people that couldn't get out at all and delivered stuff, it was truly amazing. That wasn't just money. That was absolute commitment of action, of helping our fellow human beings, and that happened on a grand scale in London. And I was very, I don't often use the word proud, but I was really proud of the Masons in London. I'm sure it's the same elsewhere, so I'm not suggesting we were unique. I'm just saying, for my particular responsibility, I was amazed. So I don't know if that covers what you wanted to have answered, but I really feel that it was good. And also in between Masons, there were a group of people that created drop-in for afternoon tea on Zoom, of course, and I attended one of those. And it's really the time commitment that people put in to making that possible, to break up somebody's monotony if they happen to be on their own at home or whatever. I thought it was truly brotherly love.
Oh, it was overwhelming, and yes, you're right. It did happen in every province and across the country. But we're talking about Metropolitan Grand Lodge, and everybody did And a sterling job, and that was widely documented. Now, how do your roles as a Metropolitan Grand Master and Metropolitan Grand Superintendent work together? Because I mentioned you were a busy Freemason, and that takes it to an all different level, doesn't it?
Well, yes and no. I don't think of them as separate. And while I realise that some provinces have separate provincial Grand Master and provincial Grand Superintendent, I think there are quite a number that are double headers, as they're called. And I guess, having experienced the double heading, I think it's right, because you bring everything together. You bring the work of Royal Arch and Craft together, and I think that's good. You know, and we all know that people that have finished their 3 degrees in Craft and then want to go on, and you know, in a sense, Royal Arch completes that Masonic process. And for me, there really isn't a dilemma or difference. The way we've organized, and I changed Met to be organized, is we have very close relationships. So, for example, this morning, we had on Zoom, because it's the easiest way of making sure everyone can get together quickly and easily without the journey. And when you know each other very well, it's perfectly okay. You don't have to win people over. And so my 4 deputies, 1 Royal Arch, 3 Craft, and I were on Zoom this morning for an hour, and well, it was meant to be an hour, it was a little bit longer, covering a whole range of subjects. And it's interwoven, Royal Arch and Craft, and I think that's how we all ought to think about it. You know, I really believe that should be those 2 orders should be the principal focus of Masons, you know, first and foremost. And so, no, I don't find any problem with the 2. And in fact, in some ways, I think it's better that you have 1 person or more than 1 person that are both, so that you bring them together, and therefore there's an equal focus on people progressing from Craft to Royal Arch, you know, within London, and I'm sure it's the same elsewhere, but that's how I see it.
Thank you, Michael. Back to the chat screen. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, brethren, companions, thank you for submitting your questions. We never get through them all. Christopher Hyam, what has been your most meaningful and joyful moment in your Masonic career so far, Sir Michael?
Wow. Well, I'm gonna pick 2. One is charity, and which is a principal focus of mine and has been, as any London Freemason will know. You know, and when we managed to get, you know, over £2 million in about 18 months together to enable the 2nd air ambulance to fly in London, and hearing the work that those personnel do, whether it's the pilots or the doctors that go out in the helicopters, or when they can't fly, in the fleet of cars that we bought for them, you know, this is amazing. And to look at all of the faces in Metropolitan Grand Lodge, that when they were having this described, and the pride and the joy at being able to give this. And let's not forget that, you know, Masonry giving, charitable giving, isn't about going and fundraising from other people. This is our own money that we freely give for causes that we believe in. And I believe that those that give, i.e. the Freemasons in an area or a province, need to be as close to possible to the recipients and beneficiaries of their benevolence. And benevolence isn't just money, it is also action, it is also involvement. And I think that, you know, we have seen that in a number of occasions in London, whether it's the cyber knife at Bart's, whether it's the air ambulance, whether it's the 2 high-rise fire platforms for the London Fire Brigade, and so on and so forth. Doesn't really matter. They're all trying to help Londoners be safe, and you know, this is remarkable. So I think that's one of my best moments. Probably the ceremony for my installation as Metropolitan Grand Master by the Program Master, with both the Deputy and the Assistant Grand Master there. I mean, that was pretty special, with everybody, and closing Metropolitan Grand Lodge and so on. I think for the first time, I think that's, for anybody, would be a bit special.
Oh, two great examples. Thank you so much, Michael. Let's talk about your relationship with UGLE. Do you have a line manager that you need to report to?
Yes, His Royal
Who's that then?
The Grand Master is the person that appoints me. You know, but serious. So that is, in reality, as it is for a provincial Grand Master, that is in reality the line of command. But you know, if we get away from the sort of silly trite answer, the answer is that there isn't actually one boss, and it's not, you know, getting told. I don't think I've ever even had suggested in strong terms by either the Program Master, the Deputy Grand Master, or the Assistant Grand Master anything to do at all. You know, or the President of the Board of General Purposes. I don't think I've ever been told or anything remotely like that. But of course, I believe in a close working relationship with them. And you know, Peter Lowndes, and I would speak from time to time. I probably speak more often to Jonathan Spence, and I know David Wootton well from the city, so we do things together. And you know, I'm in one lodge with the Deputy Grand Master, and I'm in one lodge with the Assistant Grand Master, so we see each other there as well. So there is no I wouldn't say it's a sort of line management thing, but it is, I think it's only sensible that everybody relates to you know, what UGLE is wanting. And of course, I have an opportunity to influence that, not only by directly talking to the high rulers, but also as a member of the Board of General Purposes, which is, after all, the board that actually runs the business of Masonry, Freemasonry in the UK. Sorry, in England and Wales. Is you know, I've got the opportunity to say whatever I want there, and I've had good relations with the two presidents that I've served with.
It's a great opportunity, isn't it, Michael, for you to be involved in these things and have your view on how you think things should be run. So let's talk about the changes that you've made whilst being Grand Master. Any particular changes that come to mind? Well,
I suppose it was the ones that I referred to right at the beginning when you asked me about how I could do this, and what I discussed with the Program Master and Deputy Grand Master. And the answer is that I knew that we needed more representatives that were able to go out, but at very senior level. So as opposed to having one deputy on the Royal Arch side and one on the craft side, we went to 3 deputies on the craft side and one on the Royal Arch, which is roughly proportional to the size. It's not exact, but roughly proportional to the size. We have 6 assistant Metropolitan Grand Masters, which actually remain the same, but there were 20 Metropolitan Grand Inspectors, and each one had approximately 100 units to look after, which is more than over half of the provincial Grand Masters or superintendents. And this didn't seem right. I didn't see how they could get round, and we needed them to be more capable of doing it alongside active roles, as opposed to having to be retired in order to do it. So we increased that number from 20 to 30. So they've now got approximately 55 units, which is still quite a lot, and is still more than about half of the provinces, but provincial Grand Masters or superintendents. But it is more manageable, and I think that was a move that has been very successful. We've also moved to more streamlining of the secretariat, which I've got to tell you is stunningly good in London, in my opinion. We have 12 paid full-time staff, and we have about, I don't know, 200 volunteers, which is amazing, and that do excellent work, even in the rather disappointing area of disciplinary stuff that has to be done from time to time, which I've got to say is the biggest downside of my role, if I'm honest. But it's we generally, I would say, modernized it a bit. I changed the structure of meetings a bit. So those are the things that I did when that I've done over my time, and I've also pretty rigidly enforced the, well, I mean, there have been exceptions, but they're pretty rare, of the term of office of everybody. So we keep going with it, so other people get an opportunity and so on. And when you bear in mind the Deputy Metropolitan Grand Masters become past junior Grand Wardens with their office, they are very senior in their own right, and therefore can easily represent me when they're out. And it's a really special occasion when they go out to a special event, or in a lodge, an individual lodge or chapter.
Michael, how would you compare being Grand Master for the Metropolitan Grand Lodge to running a business? Because you've run a few businesses. How does it compare?
Well, it's different. One's got to remember that we're dealing, apart from the paid staff, we're dealing with volunteers, and it's their hobby, it's their pastime, it's their enjoyment, and therefore there's a line to be drawn, so that there is something different about it. But for me, people that are prepared and volunteer or accept offices or roles within Met, they do it with their eyes open. We make it very clear what's expected, and then we do sort of expect them to carry that through, not because we're being big chiefs, but because it is absolutely vital for the membership as a whole. Because we're not there to rule them. I know we're rulers, but we're not there to rule them. What we're there to is serve them. Our role as metropolitan rulers, or the office holders, is to serve the membership, not to lord it over them and for our own glorification. So if we accept offices on the basis that we're going to do stuff, then we've got to do it. And we try and do it as gently as we can, but there has to be an expectation, because otherwise we don't give members the service, the support, the encouragement that they deserve. We also then fail to attract younger members. I'm all forever pushing lodges and chapters to meet later in the afternoon if it's a weekday meeting, because younger Masons with professional careers or business careers cannot get away in the middle of the afternoon, and we need them to be later. And it's an incredible correlation between success and meeting at 5:30 or 6 or even later. There is an incredible correlation when you look at the numbers. And for me, it's really important that those that take on the roles because they want to, not because they're forced into them, but if they take them on, that they ought to do their very best and commit the time that it's necessary to do them.
I think everything you've just said there is music to everybody's ears who are joining us this evening. We haven't got long left, sadly, Michael, so we will get through as much as we possibly can in the final few minutes. Gerald Riley, in 2002, the late Lord Millets claimed that London had a unique brand of Freemasonry. How might this be misunderstood? Or I'll rephrase that, how might this be understood?
Oh, understood. I don't know. I didn't hear him say it. So I honestly don't know. I don't want to say that London is totally different from everywhere else. you know, in terms of its style of masonry, it clearly is different in a lot of aspects. I mentioned the fact that most people travel to it by public transport. Most people therefore can enjoy some of the excesses of the festive board without worrying about how they're going to get home. The journey they have to travel in sometimes, because the London Masons are spread, you know, quite far and wide as well. I like to think that London Masonry takes its ritual seriously, but not too seriously. In other words, that we're never criticizing. If I sit in a lodge or chapter and I hear a tutter, I don't like it. I think we all know what I mean by a tutter.
Absolutely.
I really don't like it. You know, people do their best. Some are better at ritual than others. Some, you know, even though they're brilliant at ritual and they've learned it all, and they stumble or they make a mistake, it happens to us all, including me. And you know, I really don't like that. So I hope that we're a tolerant lodge, Grand Lodge, and I hope that our focus on London and the benefit that we can bring to Londoners is probably, because of our size and scale, is more readily understood by the general public, gets more publicity from for the general public, and so on. But no, I wouldn't like to say that London Freemasonry is in any way different in essence to that anywhere else.
What do you do when you're not busy working in both masonry and in daytime life? How do you relax?
How do I relax? I do enjoy our garden. We used to narrowboat. We've recently, a couple of years ago, thank goodness, just before the lockdown, sold it. So we used to do that. We try to go to France as often, you know, I say as often as we can, 2 or 3 times a year. We both like music. I like particularly walking 2 Springer Spaniels first thing in the morning, and in this weather you have to walk them very early in the morning because otherwise it becomes unbearable, because they need a fairly long walk, and I really enjoyed doing that. In terms of other activities, you know, ignoring the City of London Corporation, ignoring masonry, and ignoring my business life, because I chair one company and I'm a director of another 3, I think. I really enjoy, how can I put it, a bit of relaxation in terms of a glass or 2 of wine. I collect it, but I don't only collect it, I do like to sample what I've collected, and good food. And I also have other things, like I chair a board of governors of a school in Essex, a public school, and 1 or 2 other things like that. So it's a full life, but a very enjoyable one. And of course, I have 4 grandchildren, and 2 children and 4 grandchildren. So we very much enjoy their company and activities as well.
So, Michael, your relaxation is exhausting by the sounds of it. There's a lot going on there. We've sadly run out of time. Time for one more question. What are your priorities going into the future for the Metropolitan Grand Lodge and Metropolitan Grand Chapter, would you say?
I think more of the same, if I'm honest. I think we want to refocus on our charitable activities again. I've had a little bit of a breather from it, you know, having a big appeal because of the pandemic, because we've had a series of them and just needed a bit of sort of downtime from that. But I think we need to start thinking about that. The main activity is membership. We need to attract new members, younger members. We need to be proud to and pleased to say we're Masons, not to say, oh, you know, make an apology for it. And we need to recognize that the values that Masonry brings in our business life, for example, you know, it teaches people more confidence, how to speak in public more, and so on. And I think these are benefits that we generate for all Masons when they become when they join the fraternity. So I think we need to talk more about that. And I think we need to concentrate on how we retain members, how we nurture members, so that they understand that each and every Mason, irrespective of rank, is a brother and is wanted within our lodges and chapters. Sorry, I should have said companion or brother, but I hope you'll understand I meant both. And I think those are the really important focuses going forward.
So, Michael, I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you for the last 45 minutes or so. I think your brethren and companions are very lucky to have you. I know you're no stranger to doing interviews, but did you enjoy your Solomon Live experience?
I really did, Brodie. And as we were talking about before, I do not at all feel Humphried.
No, we'll wait for the next one. So, Michael, thank you for being absolutely fantastic and being a very special guest this evening. And ladies and gentlemen, companions and brethren, our next Solomon Live will be on Tuesday, the 2nd of August. Write that in your diary, please. Right, worshipful brother Isaac Hood, District Grand Master of Ghana, will be joining us to discuss the long history of Freemasonry in Ghana, West Africa, and across the continent. So that's Tuesday, the 2nd of August. We'll begin at 7:30, as per usual. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you register for Solomon, solomon.ujle.org.uk, full of useful and fantastic content, your daily advancement in Masonic knowledge. Until then, thank you for joining us this evening, and we shall see you back here very, very soon.